Hello, I'm Susan Elliott, and today we're going to be talking with Chad Smith. Chad has been with the Los Angeles Philharmonic since the year 2002, and he is just now coming up on 1 year as the organization's president and CEO. The Philharmonic operates 3 different venues in Los Angeles. One of them is, of course, Walt Disney Concert Hall. Another is the Hollywood Bowl, and the third is the Ford Theater. The bowl, the sheer size of the bowl, has enabled them to record some concerts in July and August, which we will start to see starting September 25th under the title of Sound Stage. And Chad is going to tell us about that. Hi, Chad. Thanks for doing this. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sure, you bet. Tell me what's going on out there in Los Angeles right now. Are you all still, well, you're still with masks and so forth, but are you allowed to gather large gatherings? What's happening?
Yeah, so where we are in California at the moment, and Los Angeles in particular, is that the state put out a new set of guidelines just last week, a 4-tiered system. It's a color-coded system that outlines ways that our economy is going to reopen. And Los Angeles County is currently in Tier 1, which is the most restrictive. And Tier 4 would be that place where, with some limitations, most businesses would be able to reopen. But we also have been lucky in that we've been able to bring our musicians together under the film and television agreement that is unique to our LA County. And so we, in August, for a couple of weeks, brought our musicians together to start filming some performances, which we will ultimately stream. And that's something that we're going to continue to do in the weeks and months ahead.
That provision was in place for the studio work, and then you guys just piggybacked on that, or?
We did piggyback on it. And it was the language, of course, in close contact with our county health department, and kind of asking questions: does this apply to us if we wanted to do film capture of some concert work to stream? And the answer was yes, as long as you follow the safety protocols that are in place for the film and television, the provision J, then yes, as an orchestra, you can come together and film that, as long as there's not an audience. And
right.
It's really only for essential personnel. But it was a big production that we went through in order to do that capture back in August.
How far is the bowl from Disney Hall?
So the Hollywood Bowl is unique, I think, in this world, in that it is a major outdoor amphitheater in the center of the city. It is in the Hollywood Hills, so just off one of the major freeways, the 101 freeway. And it's about 10 miles, 11 miles on that freeway between Walt Disney Concert Hall and the Hollywood Bowl. So as we thought about the unique assets of the association and how we might be able to begin bringing musicians back, it was very clear that the place that we were going to bring our musicians back first was at the Hollywood Bowl. It's an enormous stage. The stage is, first off, it's an outdoor venue, which we all know is safer at this point in the crisis than indoor venues. Mm-hmm. It's a venue where the infrastructure for film capture and recording is built in. The performances at the Hollywood Bowl are all microphoned, are mic'd already. So all of the musicians who perform at the Hollywood Bowl are individually mic'd already. So that was already built in place. And again, the size of the stage is twice the size, at least twice the size of Walt Disney Concert Hall. So we could bring more people together safely and have approximate an orchestra on stage. It was, I will tell you, it was a remarkable thing to watch, and all of the protocols that we had to go through, and in fact we implemented additional safety precautions beyond the protocols that are outlined within the county provision. But it was remarkable to bring those musicians together as an orchestra for the first time at that point in about 5 months, and hear them play together.
Whose idea was it to go to the bowl? Where did that come from?
Well, I think it was everyone's idea. I will tell you. I will say. One is that the bowl is one of the most beloved spaces in Los Angeles, and it really. And when we canceled the Hollywood Bowl season, we had to do that towards the end of May. I think we were all struck by this incredible outpouring from across the community of attendees, those people who have been coming and sitting in the benches or the boxes for decades, and artists who had played the bowl again for many, many years. There was this wonderful article in the LA Times, just people talking about kind of what it means for someone in Los Angeles without the Hollywood Bowl. So, so for us, the idea was that we would go to the Hollywood Bowl because we could. We knew that when we were doing these streaming projects, we wanted to differentiate our product by really leaning on this idea of a director-driven capture. That it wasn't just going to be a concert that we were filming. We weren't trying to kind of just recreate something that happens indoors or a concert and stream it. We wanted it to have a unique perspective. We're from Los Angeles, you know, there were some of the most kind of talented directors and directors of photography and people across our community who weren't working, and so we had this incredible accessibility to some of the finest talent in Los Angeles. And all of that is to say that the Hollywood Bowl is one of the most photogenic spaces, I think, anywhere in the world. It's one of the most beautiful venues. And we were really able to lean into that as well.
So how many people do you have on stage for Beethoven's Seventh? I mean, do chamber versions of that piece exist, or what?
So the Beethoven Seven was a really interesting, an interesting moment, as I think I might have mentioned. We had about 40 musicians on stage. And again, the stage of the Hollywood Bowl is at least twice the size of a normal concert hall stage. But what was fascinating about it is that this is a piece of core repertoire. Every orchestra in the world plays Beethoven 7, probably once a year, right? It's in our musicians' fingers. It's certainly a piece that Gustavo has done with the orchestra many, many times. There's this incredible familiarity and sense of kind of ownership, right? That there's a sense that this is repertoire that kind of lives and flows through our bodies. And what was interesting is that when we filmed it, the safety protocols required that the musicians the string players wear masks and be at least 6 feet apart, which is probably twice as far away from each other as they are used to. And our wind players—
It must have been quite an adjustment.
It was a huge adjustment. It was a huge adjustment. The wind players had to be 12 feet apart, wind and brass players. And the wind and brass players had to be behind 3 walls of plexi. So you think about the craft of making music as an orchestra, and these are some of the finest musicians in the world. It is, they are so used to listening in such a way, in such a nuanced way. And what we had to do was we had to kind of take that almost superhuman skill that they develop as these finely trained musicians and kind of close it off. In this moment, when I heard the musicians in those first rehearsals struggle to hear each other, for me, it became a very powerful connection to what Beethoven must have been going through in 1812 when he composed Beethoven's Seventh. He was probably 2 or 3 years away from being completely deaf, but certainly 15 years into the loss of his hearing. So those kinds of things, I think, were unexpected elements.
Were the musicians individually mic'd? Were there monitors on stage? How did that work out?
So the musicians were individually mic'd on stage. And again, this is a very common thing for our musicians at the Hollywood Bowl. When we perform classical concerts at the Hollywood Bowl, it's an 18,000 seat venue. I think the last audience member is probably 500 or 600 feet from the stage. So there's a very sophisticated amplification system. So they're comfortable with that, which made it possible. And I think But there was this process of listening that was impacted by the distance. And something that's also interesting is I remember in that first rehearsal where the first music that the musicians played together was the final movement from the Mother Goose Suite of Ravel. And if you know it, the Enchanted Garden. It's just one of the most, I think, beautiful and poignant pieces of music in our kind of classical music canon. And it was really interesting. Gustavo was like, I need you to listen a little less and watch a little bit more. And which is almost exactly the opposite of what you say in kind of normal rehearsal. Of course, once they adjusted, then it shifted back to that sense of kind of really listening, but listening in a different way.
Are the musicians rotating, or did they rotate in this process, or did they volunteer to be part of the recording? How did that work out?
So the musicians were all asked to participate, and incredibly, we had 80 musicians who participated across 6 days of filming. So at any one time, of course, we didn't have 80 musicians on stage, but what we were doing is capturing a lot of music, close to 2 hours of music in those 3 days of filming and 6 days of work. So the musicians, I think, there were some pieces that were for 9 musicians, and then I think the largest piece was a piece by Tom Addis, a new piece by Tom Addis called Dawn, which was captured with, I think, over 40 musicians, some on stage, some out in the house. The staff has all been working remotely. So that's been, I think, challenging. It was a big shift. It was a big pivot that we had to make in early March. And again, I would say there was a real sense of a collective sigh when we all came together, when many of the staff came together for these filming weeks. And just a sense of doing what we do. That finally, where there's live music happening. Yes, it's being captured, and yes, it's going to be streamed, but we're producing the work that we were founded to create.
So you mentioned in some of your news releases that you're estimating losses about $90 million from start to as I guess through the fall. And what's interesting is that while everybody is losing money hand over fist, they're also earning money, from their endowments in the market. What do you see going forward? Are you going to wait and see how these films are received and then take it from there? Or do you have a couple of scenarios coming up?
So I think what we're looking at, I think there are 2 questions there, and if I may, I'll talk a little bit about the economic impact, and then I will also talk a little bit about our plans for the streaming going forward. So yes, the Philharmonic has been deeply impacted. We're I think quite unique, certainly within the orchestra world and within the performing arts, in that our business model is built upon an extremely robust earned revenue line. Close to 65 to 70% of our income comes from ticket revenue or revenue associated with a live performance, and that is quite unusual. It also,
and much of it's from the bowl.
Correct. And so 2/3 of that number comes during 4 months during the summer. So when I explain why the Philharmonic has been so deeply impacted, it's that this hit us at a particularly difficult time, which is that in March we estimate about $10 million of losses with the cancellation of our winter season, but there was a $70 million loss of revenue in the cancellation of the Hollywood Bowl, and now we're looking at another $10 million in lost revenue with the cancellation of the fall. So it's 90 million of lost revenue. You asked a question about endowments, and when we really started looking at this, and back in March and April, all I was doing was working with our finance committee of the board and our finance department and modeling out scenarios and trying to understand how deep this would be for us, it became very clear that we weren't going to be able to cut our way out of this. We made significant cuts. We cut close to $60 million worth of expense between March 13th and the end of our fiscal year, which is September 20th. It's an enormous loss. And even with those cuts, there was still a $21 million deficit. So the board leadership of the Philharmonic recognized that we're not going to cut our way out of this. And so we made the decision to take an extraordinary and extraordinary draw on our endowment of $21 million in addition to the normal annual 5% draw. So in this fiscal year, which is just coming to a close, there's something close to $38 million of endowment draw. Now, we are looking, now as we kind of have managed through that process this fiscal year, we are looking at FY21 with a very different lens. And our hope and expectation is that just as the Hollywood Bowl was such a devastating loss to us financially, it will also be the springboard for us. That our hope and expectation is that there will be such pent-up demand within our community to come and experience music live when it is safe to do so, and our hope is that that will be by next summer, that we will be able to kind of begin to kind of pull ourselves out of it through that work. And this is the kind of financial modeling that we continue to do day after day. We also have had to lean significantly on additional fundraising, and we launched a $35 million fundraising campaign to, again, help ensure that we would be able to kind of manage our way through the next, say, from now, next 14 months.
So thank you so much for talking to us. Good luck.
Thank you.